What's going on, guys? What's happening? Essential Gear here. So today we're going to be looking at the Roll 1 trauma pouch and kit from FERRO Concepts, and maybe why you would or would not want to run this thing in one of your systems. Now, I got this thing a while back because I was really more intrigued with it more than anything, and guys are always trying to save space with their gear on their carrier, and I thought this would be an interesting solution for that. And this does fall into more of that Gucci gear category, so there is that to think about. A little history on this thing from the website. The concept for this pouch was developed in 2017 in Syria by an 18 Delta. What you see before you is the perfected product that was made in collaboration with Ford Observations Group. So they actually market this thing as being a space saver, meaning it will be occupying space in your carrier where there's usually nothing there. So they also market this thing as being able to be used for lumbar support because it is going to be in that small to back area. Now, this is really a non-starter for me. I'm not going to be using it this way. If that's important to you, maybe consider this. So let's talk about some philosophy of use here first. Maybe you're going to consider a pouch like this if you're looking to go slick and still want a basic IFAK somewhere, or have really all the other real estate taken on your carrier because of some other mission-specific criteria. Now, if you're a military guy, I can't imagine that whatever unit or team you're with won't be dictating where your IFAK will be, or at least a general area, but I guess this could still be an option. And let's say you're a civilian, maybe that doesn't make sense to you. So if you're working with a team of guys, or girls, I guess, you are going to want to have all that life-saving equipment in familiar locations on your carrier, so that the members of your team can access it readily due to the training you have done. And really, in other words, just keep it simple or uniform. What if you've already used your tourniquet or tourniquets and you can't find the one on your buddy he has stashed away at the small of his back? So the other thing about this, I can think of some scenarios where you will have a harder time accessing this FERRO Concepts kit on a down guy who is supine, for example. Now, you'll be able to get to it if you absolutely know where it is, or if he's wearing a pack that elevates his back a bit more so you can see it. But what if you don't know where it is? And yeah, I know these are kind of like more what ifs, but these are just things I think about. And really, I think the guys who are going to buy this fall into about two groups. The first being just the regular dude who saw this on Instagram or Facebook or a video like this, and they're like, man, this is a really cool idea, Gucci gear. Maybe he hasn't thought it through as much. And the second group are guys that got this for a specific purpose, maybe a higher tier group, and their training is going to overcome whatever kind of limitations this may have. Nothing against those guys who buy stuff to look cool, that's half the battle, right? But your life-saving gear has to be functional or you won't use it, or won't be able to. So just ask yourself how many times you've had to change up your EDC because something was uncomfortable or too heavy to carry. Speaking of limitations, this thing does have its nuances, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And where this thing really shines for me is putting other non-medical mission-specific items in there. It could also be used as a backup medical resupply pouch if you're not running a pack. So for me, I won't be using this as my primary IFAK, but that's not to say it doesn't have its use or isn't of high quality, because it is. One of the main issues with this thing for me is that although it can be open one-handed, you kind of have to fumble around with it a bit. And once again, if you're working with a team, maybe you could consider training to be able to use these things in the stack, just like you would with mags or reloads. And also realize you don't have to use the inner pouch. You could put something in that outer pouch that you need and cinch it down with those two straps. And I should mention, this is a Dangler type pouch. I don't know if I said that. But it is designed to go in the back of your plate carrier or battle belt and just kind of hang there. Those Dangler pouches are getting pretty popular these days. So speaking of resupply, let's go over the actual kits they provide on their website. Now, this is the military version, which goes for $99, and I believe that hasn't changed since at least December of 21, which was the last time I looked at it. They also provide a civilian version, which has the same contents with the exception of the two decompression needles. Speaking of the needles, they are 10 gauge instead of the normal 14 gauge that most places use. Not a big deal. Some groups are transitioning to these because of some recent trauma studies, but they'll both do. Now, the rolls themselves are tiered, but they only sell the first tier, which is the roll 1. The roll 1 is considered by them as being what is needed by a warfighter to encounter a trauma casualty. Now, I would be interested to see what is in their other rolls, and I assume they don't have them on their website because they contain some more intermediate or advanced interventions. These are things in which the legality of selling them to people without licenses or training gets a bit murky. Now, one thing I like about these rolls is that they can be used as resupply kits. They come vacuum sealed, so you can store these away wherever you want without worrying about the stuff inside getting wet or whatever. And you can operate with just the roll, and whenever you had to use it, everything could be restocked for your next mission or training evolution. So as far as the contents itself, I would consider it pretty bare bones. So we have a chest seal, nasopharyngeal airway, 28 French. You have the 2 needles, S-rolled gauze, elastic wrap, some combat gauze. This is the hemostatic type. And then a casualty card for turnover. So these are all high-quality combat-proven components. They did opt to use an ACE-style bandage instead of a compression wrap, which isn't really a big deal. You can do a lot with an ACE bandage, like wrap ankles and whatnot. Now, there is a trick you can use with a ACE-style bandage, or really any kind of compression wrap, where you can do a couple turns on it, add some twists, and apply that over the wound to put some pressure. Maybe I'll add a clip of me doing that in there later. So they might have also put the ACE in there because it's cheaper, just speculating here. Now, they should have provided a pair of gloves, in my opinion. Most of the guys in the military, which is what this is marketed for, are really going to be pretty clean pathogen-wise for the most part. Well, maybe I shouldn't even say that. Looking at you, Marines. So personally, I'm not going to stock anything in one of my kits without gloves because I work mostly with civilian patients and they have everything in the spectrum going on with them underneath the skin. So the other thing they should add would be a Sharpie. I mean, they have the casualty card in there for turnover, so why not provide a Sharpie? So really just gloves and Sharpie to make this thing a complete resupply kit for me. And of course, to fulfill the requirement of the Marchi algorithm, you are going to have to pair this kit with a tourniquet. Most guys are already going to have one rubber banded to their kit somewhere, probably on one of their shoulder straps. So really, the only thing that would stop me from using this as a resupply kit would be because it lacked one of these 3 things. Not something you can't overcome if you are looking for a vacuum seal kit, just something to think about. You can always get the other items and prep them yourselves. Now, North American does have one of their basic trauma kits. I've seen it at Refuge Medical and LA Police Gear, I think. It's about $50, and it does have a tourniquet in there, so that might be another option for you. But moving on to the pouch itself, there are 2 components, which are the dangler and then the insert. The dangler is just a tube which has open ends and is designed to be accessed from either side. It has shock cord that you can cinch down the pouch with. And you do have to be careful how tight you make those straps or shock cord because it could restrict your ability to get that inner pouch out. Now, it really wasn't consistent for me, and it probably had to do how I packed that inner pouch because sometimes with the shock cord cinched down, it was easy to get out. Sometimes it wasn't, and it may be the mechanics of me pulling it out as well. Really a lot of factors there. So the inner pouch seems to be built well. The material is kind of like a tent-like tarp material, so it's not very thick, but it doesn't really need to be. It does have some stitching on the edges, similar to what you will find on clothes to prevent fraying and Irish pennants. Then the inside has a pass-through or flap on the bottom for your chest seal and casualty card. And then there are 4 large elastic bands and 4 small pin-sized bands. So right off the bat, these large bands were way too big for everything with the exception of the ACE bandage. So pretty unacceptable there. As you'll see, when you attempt to open this thing one-handed, some of the contents, or most of them, just fall right out on the floor. Now, this can be overcome by double stacking the components or duplicating them. I even tried pinning them all down and that worked, but that isn't really how this thing is designed to be used, so there are some improvements to be done here. So if this thing is going to be purpose-built, I would design the length of that elastic so it would snugly fit each component. And the pen pockets are okay, but I wish they were a bit closer together so that both ends of the needle or Sharpie would fit through them while using the clip. And really one would really suffice, I think. And then you would have extras for other things like gloves. So for at least one of those small pen pockets, I would recommend making one a bit larger so that you can accommodate a pair of gloves in a baggie. And on the website, the 2 needles are sitting in between the sets of straps, so that's probably how it was intended to work there. So as far as reinsertion goes, I found that it was easiest to do so when it wasn't behind my back. I had a lot of problems putting the thing back in the roll when it was attached to my plate carrier. And by the way, the carrier you are seeing here is the Agilite K19 Gen 2. The OD green rip-away pouch on the side is a budget IFAK option that I'll be talking about in a future video, so stay tuned for that. So as far as closing this thing up goes, the single Velcro strap in the middle should be a bit more robust. It's come loose on me a few times. Now those two pigtail straps that hold the two ends together, they do pretty well. But the weakness here is that middle strap will come loose, exposing the contents. So I think just a little bit more grab with some Velcro or hook and loop would do the job there. Now there is a pull handle on either side of that inner pouch to help you get the inner out of the roll, which is the same strap you're going to use to pull it out. So deployment. Now if you have any kind of shoulder issues or a limited range of motion, you might have some trouble here. Now you can put the roll on the front side of the carrier like a true Dangler pouch if you still do want to use this thing. So my shoulder build or mobility is okay. It's not the greatest. I've had some injuries there. And so it was a bit challenging for me to get this thing out if I was pulling at the wrong angle. And what I mean by angle is really the key with this thing is you have to pull it straight out, not at a 45-degree down or up. That's when you're going to run into issues. Also, you're going to have to train with this thing to get that muscle memory down because it is a bit of a more fine-tuned motion compared to just pulling straight down or up like a traditional IFAK. Alright, so closing thoughts on this thing. I really wanted to like it, and it could be really good with some adjustments I talked about earlier. Now, FERRO Concepts does make some really good stuff. I've been using their Bison belt for a while, and that thing is amazing. So just my opinion, this is an interesting concept, but it needs some work still, which is why I'm probably not going to use it for its intended purpose. Now remember what I said earlier, just because I don't like it as an IFAK, that doesn't mean it sucks. Now this thing doesn't meet my requirements for an IFAK, mainly because I have trouble deploying it myself and opening it one-handed. But I am considering using it for my recovery strap, which can also be used as a rescue harness for casualties, so it still has its uses. And full disclosure, I didn't really test the roll under stress or anything like that, just really light use. So if you have more experience with this system, let me know if your opinions differ. It just didn't work enough for me to deploy my in-service system. I guess I should mention that K19 you saw earlier has a bunch of different stuff on there to test. I'll do a breakdown of how I set up my actual plate carrier in a later video. So that's it for now, and remember, stuff is getting silly out there. Get your medical supplies before you can no longer do so. Essential Gear out.